Here's a question I hadn't yet pondered, which is why I was asked the question. How many 5 stars does Oregon get this cycle? Can they get the number one class? I thought of the second one. Lots of recruiting talk on today's episode of Locked On Ducks.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view of the day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks. As those of you on YouTube can see, it's a lot of me and Brian Smith today. We're talking all things portal recruiting on a crossover edition of this show and his show, The Portal, your daily recruiting and NIL portal podcast here at the Locked On Network. We talk about 5 stars. We talk about big names Oregon's going after. We talk about Ryder Lyons, and all of it. Here is how that conversation sounded. I'm the guest of sorts on my own show today. How about that?
Help me figure all of that out. Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, also known as a guy that likes to cook a lot, but we'll talk about that on another podcast.
Once we get a Locked On food show, Brian, I'm ditching Locked On college football and I'm hopping over. Over.
I'm quoting you on that tomorrow on. All right. So let's just start off with this. We always talk about this when I come on your show. How many 5 stars do you think Oregon can land? They usually go big game hunting quite a bit, and it's really hard to pick which guys Oregon's going to get. But just not asking for specific names, but how many do you think they can end up with in totality?
I think 3 to 4. They're sitting at 2. This does depend on what metric you look at to determine
that's true.
A 5-star ranking. I personally am a 24/7 sports composite guy. I think that's the most holistic method that is out there. So
if you want to use that, go ahead.
Yeah, I've always just been in that camp that, it has the most information and data going into it. So I think that's the best way to do it, but hey, that's just me. So right now they've got 2. I think it's reasonable they end up with at least 3, maybe 4. The upper limit would be 5. I would be pretty shocked in a great way, if Oregon winds up with 5 or more 5 stars in this cycle. I think the most likely number is 3. I'd put that at about a 60% probability. And I think you've also got about 38% chance they wind up with 4, 2% or less that they wind up with 5. And the reason that I say 5 feels less likely, Brian, is one of the 5 stars they have right now, Richard Wesley, the EDGE product out of Southern California, really, really talented player. His dad apparently was a little surprised that he chose Oregon, and that wasn't really what he was necessarily expecting. I'm not as worried as some of the Oregon fans I've gotten messages from, like, man, is he still wide open with his recruitment and everything? I'm like, I don't know. Even if he is, I'd rather be Oregon and be in the lead compared to the other schools who now have to make a push or any sort of offer to get him to outright decommit. But they're in the mix for several guys, and I think this number could have easily been 4 or 5, or more easily, I should say, if they'd landed either Jared Curtis or Jackson Cantwell, but struck out on both of those 5-star prospects. Plenty more are in the fold, but that maybe mild and I think overall overhyped uncertainty about Richard Wesley's future is why I say I think 3 is the minimum. I think 4 is possible, and 5 technically in range.
Okay, so that leads me to the next question, which is perfect for this. Emmanuel Iheanacho, his recruitment has been all over the place. I mean, yeah, I remember you asked me one day, is he really looking at Maryland? Well, apparently he's not anymore. I don't know what happened there. I'm not sure.
He might have looked at Maryland's record for the last few years. Just a guess.
Since the mid-'80s, but that's another story.
Yeah.
When they had Boomer Esiason, they were good. Boomer's been retired a while. So
at least they're trying. I give them credit. Places like that, that take jokes like I just made from people all the time that, are trying to put together the NIL funds to be competitive. I tip my cap and say, you know what? Why not? Why? Why not? What else are you going to do? Just sit around and accept being mediocre? No. Go figure out how to have an Indiana type season from last year.
Absolutely. That's a good reference too. Obviously, another Big Ten school. So, Iheanacho is not just a luxury as a 5-star. They need at least one elite tackle in this class, and they lost Cody Green to Washington. Is there anybody else now that Cantwell's off the board at tackle? They got is there another really good tackle? It doesn't have to be 5-star, but just thinking if they miss on Iheanacho, are they going to come up a little short in this class? I guess it's really the question.
Yeah, it's certainly the position group that I'm watching most heavily because you've had the reports about Cantwell and Iheanacho being in the running to choose Oregon throughout their entire recruitments. And, the moment that Cantwell committed to Georgia, there were a lot of, recruiting analysts and people that said, I'm predicting Iheanacho to go to Oregon. We'll see if that bears itself out. He's not committing until August, and he'll be one of the biggest, if not the biggest, non-quarterback name to come off the board around that time of year. He's,
right.
By most services, number 2 overall offensive tackle. So I'm definitely watching the offensive line because of those guys and because of the Cody Green flip to Washington. I wasn't expecting that until I woke up to a text from a source who said, hey, this is going to happen. And I said, wait, what? He's been to Oregon, and then it happened literally 20 minutes later. And that was something that Oregon fans kind of just had to deal with. So like, oh, Washington got one of our guys. That's not quite as much fun. So those reasons make me look at the offensive line position very heavily in this cycle. I think Kelvin Obat, the 4-star offensive tackle, is another name to watch for Duck fans out there. There are a couple other ones. I think Obat, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, is the highest rated one that I've seen Oregon be tied to. I think between him and Iheanacho, or just thinking outside the box, flipping Cody Green back from Washington, which would make him one of the most interesting recruits in the cycle, I think flipping Green is the least likely of those scenarios. And right now, it seems like Iheanacho would be the most likely guy that they land of those 3. But I think that's another name just to keep in mind as Oregon goes after offensive linemen in this class, because I don't think it's necessarily a huge pressing need. Like, oh my gosh, they need to find a true freshman that is going to come in and start right away. No, they've recruited the position pretty well over the last couple of years. Zaire Addison is in the class. I know it's a guy that you like a lot. Douglas Utu, another one who was committed to Tennessee, flipped to Oregon in the 25 cycle. He won't be on campus for another year or 2 after his mission, but Alai Kalani Uvalu is someone who I think could be Oregon's starting center one day whenever they move on from Poncho, which hopefully is after 2026. But if he has another good season, might be off to the NFL after this year. We'll just have to wait and see. So I think the offensive line room, and then there are guys from past cycles that were, developmental projects when they got recruited, guys like Devin Brooks or Fox Crater was a more highly rated recruit, but wasn't necessarily expected to start right away. Based on what I saw from him in the spring game, he still probably needs another year or 2 before he becomes a contributor with Oregon. So I think that the O-line depth is fine for now. There will come a point in time where Oregon needs to have a class that's very centered on the offensive line and has, 3, 4, or 5 guys maybe that can wind up being starters. Because they've done that in past cycles, I don't think it's as big of a need. I do still expect them to go after highly rated offensive tackles.
Is Dan Lanning the nation's best recruiter as a head coach?
Ooh.
I think he's at least got to be in the conversation.
I'm trying to think of guys I would put ahead of him. I don't think Sark gets enough credit for what he does as a recruiter. Their staff recruits very well. It's Texas. You got great resources, but it's Oregon. You got great resources there. I feel like there's got to be like an obvious name that I'm missing. I don't know if this will be popular amongst Oregon fans. Mario Cristobal is really good. He's a very good recruiter. He's recruited everywhere that he's been, every role that he's ever been in. He's done well. I would rather have Lanning though, just to be clear, both as a head coach and as a recruiter. I like Lanning a lot. So, is there a better head coach? I don't know that you could come up with 2 or 3 that would necessarily be better. I wouldn't put Lane Kiffin in there. I wouldn't put Josh Heupel in there. I wouldn't put I wouldn't even put Deion Sanders doesn't recruit high school kids. I wouldn't put him in there. Like,
there are two names you haven't mentioned yet that I'm very surprised.
is Dabo one of them?
No. He's up there though. He's just selective. He doesn't.
Kenny Dillingham's got to be up there.
He's pretty good, but he's not on that level because he's not playing with the same. He's not shopping in the same aisle yet.
True, but I think if you put him in the same aisle, he could come up with the same sorts of ingredients. Who are the two you think I'm missing?
Kirby Smart and Marcus Freeman.
Yeah.
I would also say.
I mean, well, yeah, Kirby. Okay, so like Kirby popped into my head, but then quickly went out because doesn't he kind of do what you'd expect him to do at Georgia?
He was that guy that was the lead recruiter for Bama under Saban. I followed him a long time, so I give him. And Georgia's an easy gig. Don't get me wrong; it's arguably the best job in college football. You could put it in that conversation, but he closes a lot of kids, and he's a great evaluator. Great.
Yeah, he does, and of course that. Yeah, okay. I think that's probably a mild oversight on my part. That's why we do these shows together, of course. So, I mean, if you want to put Kirby up there. Freeman is really good. Freeman is in a tougher situation, still recruits at a really, really high level. And I think Freeman overall is, I think that dude's a great coach. Great coach who has lost to Marshall, Northern Illinois, and Stanford within the last 3 years in his tenure. Go figure.
It's just wild. That's what happens to new coaches. When we come back, we're going to talk more Ducks, official visits, and top recruits on this crossover with Locked On Ducks and the Portal Podcast.
First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. If you thought you knew the Thunder were going to beat the Wolves up by a lot yesterday, well, guess what? FanDuel's the place to go. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. And if you want to bet college football, anything related to the Ducks, you can do just that. They've got it all over there at FanDuel. They've got win totals for college football. They've got national title odds, conference title odds, everything you could possibly want. Yeah, FanDuel has got it. New to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. It really is, because you can head to FanDuel.com, you place your first $5 bet, and then if it wins, what do you know? You get $200 in bonus bets. $5 first bet, correct, $200 in bonus bets. It's that simple. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA.
All right, Spencer. Do you feel really good about the Ducks official visit list, or is it just kind of par for the course and you're just so used to it, you're a little bit sublime to what's going on?
Well, I don't think those first two statements have to be mutually exclusive. I can be used to it and also feel great about it.
There you go. Explain away.
Yeah, I think the lineup of recruits that Oregon's going to have rolling through in the summer is really good. You know, a guy who I'm intrigued by is Anthony Jones. And by the way, everybody should be aware of this. I'm sure you are, Brian. There are two Anthony Jones prospects out there. And this is and here's the other thing. Oregon, way back when, I think in the 2022 class, recruited a 3-star defensive lineman, Anthony Jones, out of the Las Vegas area, who was on the Ducks, then went somewhere else, I forget, and was on Michigan State last year and laid a hit on Dylan Gabriel that knocked him out of the game for a play. He just kind of rung his bell as he was rolling out. So,
all right.
Yeah, lots of different Anthony Jones can pop in your head, but I believe UCLA just got the 3 or 4-star kid who I don't actually remember off the top of my head where they are all from, but the 5-star is the one that Oregon has been after. They are not the only school that is in the fold. Tyler Atkinson has got Oregon's attention. I haven't read any buzz lately about Brandon Arrington. I hope Oregon is still in the fold. That's another 5-star recruit who is probably a corner first, but can play receiver and looks like Travis Hunter light as a recruit. He's committing on July 5th. I hope Oregon's able to stay in the fold there. So, the lineup of guys that Oregon is either getting on campus or kicking the tires on or going out and visiting. I think the staff was just visiting Atkinson really recently. I think it's really, really solid. And you again, as long as you don't whiff on every single one of these recruits, obviously Oregon's had a couple of pretty high profile misses so far, with Jared Curtis going to Georgia and Jackson Cantwell going to Miami. When you don't get those sorts of guys, the list dwindles, but the list is not non-existent now for high profile kids they can go out and get. So I like it. It's balanced. It's definitely a little bit more defensively driven for the highest profile kids. You talk about Arrington, probably a corner. You talk about Jones, defensive lineman. Messiah Hampton is a wide receiver, a 4-star they had. Good player, really good player. They've had him on campus throughout spring. I don't know if he's scheduled to come back in the summer months, but he's been crystal ball to Oregon for a while, but he hasn't committed yet. So we're just kind of waiting to see what happens there. I think Oregon is in a good spot, and after they got the Richard Wesley commitment, who jumped their recruiting class from number 21 nationally, which is the lowest it had ever been, with at least a handful of guys committed since Dan Lanning got there in the 2023 class was his first full cycle. That was the lowest it had ever even dipped to, which speaks to the standard that he has set over the last several years. Right. It popped all the way up to number 13, but we are still early in the recruiting cycle, and it's fallen down now in the 24/7 rankings to number 18 nationally. But one kid can shoot you up 5 to 10 spots depending on who it is. So I think Oregon is in good position. I'm intrigued to see if they can get a guy like Atkinson. They were going after who was the 5-star linebacker that went to Georgia? Was it Justin Williams? Was that his name?
Yeah, he's the kid out of Texas.
Yeah. They went after him, and he went to the Bulldogs as well. So a couple of high-profile 5-star recruitments that they've lost to Georgia in the last couple of cycles. As we mentioned, Kirby Smart, very good at this recruiting thing, has been doing it for very, very long time, and longer than Lanning has been as a head coach, and he's got quite the program down there as well in Athens. So I think Oregon is in a really, really good spot to at least climb back into the top 10. You and I have talked about that before. Top 10 should still be the expectation. I think the question that will get answered in the next couple of months is, can they get inside the top 5? Because that's where it was looking early on, but then they went about a month and a half without a commitment. Or no, I think it was longer than that. It was over 2 months or so without a commitment, because Xavier Larice, the safety, committed in February, and then Wesley committed, it's like May 10th, 8th, 10th, somewhere in that sort of range, and there was nothing in between. So there's still plenty of room to rise. I just don't know if they can get into the top 5 ranks for a third straight year.
Well, that was my next question. Can they sign the number 1 class? So I think you're under the impression that's unlikely. What player do they have to get to at least give him a chance outside of Iheanacho? That's the obvious one.
Yeah, Iheanacho's the obvious one, because if the people that cover recruiting in a really, really detailed fashion, if they people that have logged predictions, I've seen I think 2 or 3 different recruiting analysts log predictions after Cantwell had committed to Georgia. If Oregon is truly in the lead there, you can't afford to lose that one and then go out and surge all the way up to the number 1 class. That's just not going to happen. So, yeah, Iheanacho is the guy you'd have to get, but you won't know that till August is when he has set his commitment date. So the other names that I look at, I feel like you'd have to get to that 5-star range that I mentioned earlier. I don't know if you could surpass everyone else that is already ahead of you. I don't know if you could get past USC. Like that in and of itself will require an extremely, and we saw this in the 2025 class to be sure, with guys like DeCorian Moore and Naeem Offord. You need 4 or 5 guys like that boost your rankings so incredibly high if you're going to pass USC for the number 1 class, because USC has some highly rated kids. I know Xavier Griffin just decommitted. Doesn't look like Oregon's going to be able to get into the fold there at all. But their volume is what's going to make them hard to knock off of that mantle. It's insane. It's USC's class right now. They're still going after kids. They had a couple decommitments in the last couple weeks. Like, that's going to happen. the number of kids they have committed right now in May, Brian, is higher than the number of kids Oregon took in their entire 2025 cycle, which was a top 5 class nationally. So
Yeah, it's odd.
yeah, USC is going to be tough to knock off of that top spot. You'd probably need a couple more high-profile decommitments from the Trojans, which it's happened before. I think things are different now for USC with their GM Chad Bowden in charge, but we'll see how it goes. But Iheanacho would feel like a must, and then between Arrington, I mean, guys like Obot or Messiah Hampton certainly will help. We haven't mentioned Ryder Lyons yet. You'd probably need to get him too. So I think that if you can get Iheanacho and Lyons and one other 5-star, like a Tyler Atkinson, the top linebacker in the class, yeah, okay. Now you could do it. Fill it out with, 5 or 6 more 4-star recruits. You could really have something there. Anything outside of that feels like you're grasping at straws.
When we come back, we're actually going to talk a little bit about Ryder Lyons, the impact he has, because his recruitment has been, well, wild. That is next here on this crossover of Locked On Ducks and the Portal Podcast. Ryder Lyons is an LDS kid. BYU's in play, but Oregon and SC are rumored more. Michigan's a possibility. I'm probably missing somebody else. Oh, Ole Miss.
Ole Miss, yep.
I mean, he's been there multiple times, and I get it. Lane Kiffin, if you're a quarterback, I can understand that one. Absolutely. Is there anybody else that Oregon is involved with at quarterback besides Lyons that's heavy, or is it all in on him and everybody else is back burner?
I want to make sure I don't mispronounce his name, but Matt Ponatoski, the quarterback from out in the state of Ohio, got an offer from the Ducks. There were a lot of ramifications, and maybe it means the staff knew, or maybe the staff knew they had to kick it into high gear. But when they missed on Cantwell and Curtis, you saw things start to, kind of snowball as much momentum as Oregon could possibly get. Cantwell's going to Miami. Ooh, look, Oregon's got 2 crystal balls for Emmanuel Iheanacho, the guy who's rated just behind him in 24/7's rankings. Or Jared Curtis decided to go to Georgia. Oh, look, it was like the next day or something that Oregon offered Matt Ponatoski. So this is not a guy to, just think of as a complete and total afterthought. He's a number 22 quarterback in the class, according to 24/7 Sports. Little, Austin Novosad style frame, 6'2", 190, probably needs to bulk it up a little bit. But when Novosad was on campus, we said the same things. Like, man, that dude looks skinny. Like, good arm. He's interesting. Looks skinny. Go look at him in the spring game. He doesn't look skinny. I think that's going to be, barring a number of changes, I think that's Baylor's starting quarterback for 2026. That's my hot take conspiracy that really isn't that hot of a take, at least not in my view. So I think that they did not do that by accident. I think they did that knowing, hey, we'd like to have an option in 2026, because you could go get Ponatoski and Lyons and then just not recruit a quarterback in 2027, because that's essentially what Ryder Lyons is, the 2027 quarterback recruit. So I think the staff has been very intentional about everything, and that's exactly what you would expect. It doesn't feel disorganized. It feels highly organized with regards to, when offers go out, when crystal balls come in, momentum, and all that sort of stuff. And, I do think it also shows that the fact that they offered Ponatoski after Jared Curtis committed to Georgia, I think showcases that, the staff didn't know either. Right? I'm sure they'd had a conversation with Matt before, but they didn't offer him before Jared Curtis committed. So I think they, like us, were on the edge of their seats. Are we going to get him? Going to get him? Nope. Okay. On to the next one.
Pretty much how you have to be honest with you.
Yep.
Speaking of commitments, who is the most likely next commit for the Oregon Ducks? If you had to guess, for lack of a better phrase.
I'd say Messiah Hampton would be that's my guess, just because the rumored ties between him and Oregon have been going on for quite a while now. I don't know if he's set a firm commitment date, but it's one thing for a kid to get a crystal ball. It's another thing for a kid to get one and then have well over a month go by as he's just kind of sitting there waiting to see, what he wants his option ultimately to be. So I say that one just kind of by default of it feels like he's been, Oregon for quite a while. But as you know, Brian, these things are always subject to change.
Absolutely. Welcome to recruiting. Welcome to my daily adventures. Biggest recruiting concern, is it offensive line? Is it quarterback? Or is it something else?
It's definitely not quarterback. I talked about that earlier this week. And not that, Oregon doesn't need to address the quarterback position. Of course you do. You always have to. But I'd say, what's that?
They've recruited the spot well.
Yeah, they have. And, in the spring game, it's just one spring game, but we know what Dante Moore looks like. He's just got to show it on the field. We have seen Austin Novosad for 2 spring games. Man, the dude looks like he can make some high-level throws. Luke Moga was vastly improved. Achilles Smith Jr. was out there as a true freshman for the first time. And, sure, he looked a little raw, but, boy, the physical traits are undeniable. And the poise I thought he showed amidst a lot of collapsing pockets was really good. It was really, really good. And so I think that, Lyons is someone who I said earlier this week, I want Oregon to get him. I'll be disappointed if they don't because he's an insanely talented kid. But given where the quarterback room is and what his timeline is, I don't feel like, Oregon is just a barren wasteland of quarterback talent if they don't have him. And yeah, I really wanted Jared Curtis too because he's my top quarterback in this 2026 cycle. I'm disappointed Oregon did not get him because I think he has the potential to be the next Josh Allen. Do I feel like Oregon's quarterback room took a massive hit? No, it just didn't get a massive boon with his commitment. That's the way that I see it. So, with the Cody Green thing, which I definitely was not expecting, I'd say offensive line is up there, and I think you want to have as many options as you can going forward. Oregon lost 4 offensive linemen from last year. They're going to lose 4 offensive linemen after this season as well. It would seem, whether or not all those guys are starters, that is TBD, but I think offensive line is definitely one of the highest priority spots. As
it should be then. Which 25 recruit kids that are enrolling now this summer or already enrolled do you think hit the ground running for the Ducks and really make a dent?
Well,
DeCorian Moore doesn't.
Yeah. Oh, okay. I was going to say, the number 1 wide receiver, hot take alert, will have a role in the offense. That is something that will take place. How big that role is in a veteran and deep receiving room, TBD, but I watched him go up against a veteran on the second play of the spring game, and he made a contested catch. Guy looks really good. So elsewhere for this true freshman class, I look in the secondary. I think Naeem Offord and Trey McNutt are guys to keep an eye on because of the position they play. It's not as if a guy like Zaire Addison isn't talented enough to make. Offensive line is really, really hard to play, but Oregon's played young guys in that jumbo offensive lineman role over the last couple of years. Janoris Wilson last year, redshirt freshman. Josh Connerly the year before, or 2 years before that was a true freshman and did it. So, there could be a chance in there for somebody, but overall, I think it's going to be tough just because Oregon has recruited really well, and Dan Lanning consistently boasts, rightly so, about the fact that Oregon's never lost a starter to the transfer portal in the time he's been there. That's an incredibly rare thing to be able to say, and I think that's a testament to the culture they have, to the connectedness of the message between the coaches and the players with regards to playing time. And I also think, NIL's a factor too. Hey, you're going to sit for 2 years, but when it's your time, it will be your time. And in the meantime, you're going to be perfectly well compensated. And once you're a starter, that'll take a bump up. So I think they do all of those things very, very well. And, the way that they've recruited. Remember, Oregon coming into 2025, Brian, back-to-back top 5 recruiting classes. It's not like there's a shortage of talent that was already on the roster that these incoming true freshmen are going to have to battle with. There are a lot of them. And so I think that for the Ducks, it's been not impossible. I've always pushed back on that notion. Dan Lanning doesn't play true freshmen. No, they've played every year that he's been there in some form or fashion. It's just a matter of how much they can contribute. Poncho, this year's starting center and last year's starting center. Why was he ready to take those reins? Because he was the first lineman off the bench as a true freshman. That's a hard thing to do when you're coming in the trenches. So I think that those guys have a shot. I just think there are some positions more than others. Like, other than Decory and Moore, boy, it's going to be tough for a receiver to see the field. At offensive line, yeah, they loaded up in the portal and they've got guys from last year. Like, no, that one's probably. Defensive line, unbelievably stacked. Linebacker, they brought in one this cycle that could play. So I go to the secondary because I look at, the amount of turnover they have there. I think that's the best opportunity for a young guy to play, a true freshman. You match that with the talent that Trey McNutt or Naeem Offord has, you're off and running.
There you go. Spencer, let's end on this. They lost a lot of players this past season, but could the Ducks, in some way, shape, or form, at least make a run in the playoff, or are they probably a year away from doing something like that?
Well, that'll depend on matchups. And it, as we learned last year, depends heavily on matchups because
Ohio State, how you doing?
Yeah, some other paths are turned out to be easier than others, and I hope that college football changes that. And they could be getting close to it, but we'll just have to wait and see. Tune into Locked On College Football for more on that. But the thing with Oregon this year that I've said for a long time is twofold. Number one, every year is playoff or bust for Oregon, barring a catastrophic, 2023 Utah level of injuries, 23 or 24. Or an injury to your quarterback. But even then, sometimes you should have a backup quarterback who's able to go out there and win you some football games. I see other teams do it all the time. There's no reason Oregon shouldn't expect that. So it's always playoff or bust every single year, unless there's that big red flag of okay, this was impossible. I think it was 2 years ago, 2023. Utah had so many injuries. It was literally, they had a guy, their starting safety was their starting running back. Okay. They were so beat up. So if that doesn't happen, every year is playoff or bust for Oregon. That's a baseline metric of success, in my view, for where the program's at, how many resources they have, where Dan Lanning is in terms of coaching compensation compared to the rest of the country. That's the expectation. This year, I think they're good. I think they could win a game, maybe two. I think 2026 is the next time we see Oregon going into the postseason, rather than with national championship aspirations, with national championship expectations as they had in 2024.
Spencer, tell everybody where they can find your work, my friend.
Locked On Ducks, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And same thing for Locked On College Football, covering the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. Sometimes Brian is there. Sometimes when I feel like bothering him.
I'm not going to comment on that.
See, there it is. Deep down, Brian resents that he has to do shows with me from time to time. But even deeper down, I think he really likes me. And I always enjoy having him on the show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and go Ducks.